Great platform. I like it because you can see, like at the bottom there, you
You
get
can see that.
audio files.
Right. I can see my audio and your audio.
Yeah, but also like going in and editing, you know, when I'm talking to you right now, it feels kind of wrong to just let you talk and to not acknowledge and go like, "Yep, uh-huh, cool, I get it." But then when you're listening to that, you kind of don't like so when you have two audio files, I can just delete all of my talking while you're talking, you know what I mean? Delete all the
Wow.
yep, mhm, and then you
Yeah.
just get a more clear sound, right? And it just makes it easier for editing and stuff too, but
Wow. Have you used this platform before?
yeah, I'm actually, and you can see here, it probably says, yeah, Icelandic Roots as my name.
Yeah.
So I've been recording podcasts for this organization called Icelandic Roots. And it's like it's mainly like a genealogy platform. It's really interesting stuff for people of Icelandic descent. So I can go in and see
Wow.
like all the family trees and who I'm related to on all
Wow.
of the Icelandic family. But they also just try to do like lots of community outreach and stuff. And, they have great blogs and all this information of Icelandic history. And they want to do a podcast too. So I've been doing that for them for the last year, which has been really cool because they already had like a pretty significant following. So each episode that we're uploading gets anywhere from 30 to 100 downloads in the first week, which you know how it is, right? Uploading a podcast, unless you already have a bit of a platform, it's just shouting into the void. No one's going to
Right.
find your
Oh
stuff. No
yeah.
one's going to listen. So it's been really neat to be able to do a podcast for a platform that already has a following. And there's been like so much engagement, and people really, it's a lot of an older audience, like in their 40s or so. And so this is like they really listen to the podcast and they pay attention, and it's been really great. But that's who provides this membership on this platform for me, so I utilize it when I'm doing my own podcast too. But it's a, yeah.
That's genius. This is a
Hmm.
really great platform. And just like that, I'll kick it off. We are live. Okay. Right into it.
Yes,
First
sir.
and foremost, thank you so much, Mr. Jack Plumley, for hopping on with me. It has been, actually, I just checked, it's been 4 years, coming up in August,
Wow,
4 years since we had our last podcast, which we talked
dude.
about cold exposure,
Uh huh.
and we talked about challenging the mind,
Mm.
how to how to seek discomfort is what we really
Hmm.
dove into.
Hmm.
And yeah, we have a lot to catch up on and talk about. Just first, introduce yourself and just catch me up with and everyone else. What's new?
Yeah. Well, thank you, man. Likewise, I would say the same thing. Like, thanks for taking the time to do this with me. And that's so interesting, man. Why don't you introduce yourself? Because, and whoever's listening to this, whatever, if they know who we are or anything like that, but it's so interesting the introduction for oneself, right? And you mentioned that time frame of like we chopped it up on a podcast 4 years ago. And first of all, I really love that I took the initiative to ever record any podcasts in the past. I never kept up with it. Like, my own personal Plumley podcast, I think I called it. I uploaded like about 10 episodes and then kind of just trickled off. Right. I was just mentioning to you how I'm doing these podcasts now for Icelandic Roots. And I'm also trying to hatch a plan to pitch myself to spearhead a podcast for the zoo that I work at, which in my mind, it's like, you guys are the top zoo in Canada. You're great, like have a social media outreach. You have all this stuff. You guys don't have a podcast, and nor do I think anyone's even really thinking about them having a podcast. For me, it's like, wow, if no one's thinking about that, why don't I like pitch that to them? Maybe they just haven't thought of it. But, anyways, that makes me think like, just doing things consistently over time and getting that experience. But also, I've kind of changed my mindset to thinking about doing podcasts or making videos or any of this stuff is like, how will this look, 20 years from now? And that's a really kind of deep question because how will the world look 20 years from now? How will technology look 20 years from now? Who knows? But I do know one thing. I myself in 20 years will probably really like to listen back to the conversations I had 20 years ago. So if that's like the baseline, then any podcast is a success for me because it's a good conversation that I'll be able to reflect upon in the future. And then it's really just a bonus if anyone else tunes in, if they learn some things, if they enjoy it as well.
And that's what I believe on my end too is being able for more people to hear and listen to the podcast
Mm,
worldwide so they can get the same value or just spark interest, something we have it's interesting you mentioned to me jumping into about the gibbons, and I didn't know what that actually was at all. So I searched it up, and it was a monkey, right? I believe.
Well, there's the
Am I
kicker.
right? See,
They're actually an ape, okay? They are
it's
actually an ape.
interesting.
So that
An
means they're
ape.
more closely related to us than monkey species are, right? If you're all familiar with evolutionary family tree of primates, but they are technically classified as, yeah, as apes. But even so, a lesser ape. So they're kind of like a subcategory of ape. But we can get into all of that if you would like.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in that too because you talked about the relation to calisthenics, and on my
Yeah.
end, and I looked at the picture of them and I saw how long their limbs were, and I said, "Wow, they can probably hang from a
Uh huh.
tree for, there are ancestors, right? They're part of
Yeah. Yeah.
us, so
Right.
that was
Right.
pretty cool." But on top of that, you said introducing. I like that concept of
Mm-hmm.
being able to introduce, myself too, and both of
Yeah.
us, because, it doesn't matter anyone that's listening, to know
Mm,
about both of our ends. So on my end, my main interest is health all around, whether that's mental health, spiritual health. Calisthenics is what I play with. That's what
mm,
I play with. I like to
mm.
say, I have fun with that and I
Right.
enjoy that. So that it's a benefit towards my physical health and mental health as well.
Mm, mm.
On top of that, I'm in chiropractic school right now. So I'm a year in, and yeah, that's going very well. Learning how to learn and unlearn at the same time, right?
Damn.
Because
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
things that I learn that are valuable, but also things that I feel like I should unlearn.
Hmm.
But that's where I'm at with my process, and I got
Yeah,
about
hey,
two and a
I
half
think
more
you're
years.
also somewhat of, in a big way, actually, a influencer, if you can use that term. And I think some people dislike it, and I don't know, but it is kind of like a fair description. If you've
Mm,
reached a certain level of interest on social media content, I don't really know what better way to describe it than a influencer in that sense. And yeah, that's for me been something really cool to watch. You mentioned this timeline, and connecting years ago and doing podcasts and stuff. And within that time frame, I've totally watched your content generate a pretty significant following online. And that might actually, I would like to know how you think about that. But also, I'm just thinking now, like you mentioned, that's what you play with, right? And I think maybe that's exactly why, or shows how your growth has occurred, is that this is just something that you seem to play with and have fun with, and you've shared along the way. And when I was talking about myself doing podcasts and these things, like I question why I haven't kept up with making certain content or doing certain things online where you, in one moment, are learning all these things like, yeah, man, I need to make a video every day and I'll get this many followers and da 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 da. It's never sustainable because it then becomes like a chore, right? But it seems like what you've been doing is much more organic, if you could use that term. So how do you think about that whole process, man?
yeah, I love that question because the more I think about that word play, that's really what it is, right? If
Mm,
if if I made it a chore, then I would have quit a long time ago. I definitely would
right.
have not, you know, um, had the inspiration to even post a video. And the reason why I started posting was because I wanted other people to move their body. And that's about
Mm,
it. I just wanted people to move their body in whatever way they wanted to do. I started posting videos about people lifting weights and,
mm,
just how to lift weights, how to lift and do certain exercises. Then found myself getting into calisthenics and
mm,
found that very fun and a fun way for me to work out. But yeah, I see it as play because content, it's really like it's my own unique mindset is my page. My page is just a collection of my thoughts, right? It's everything that just comes to me in the moment. And then
yeah.
I can create that and put that out there. And
Mm,
I will be honest though, this is really being truthful here, having no attachment to views and a
mhm,
following has been a rough journey because
mm,
I got to a point where, you get monetized
uh-huh.
and it becomes like this game of social media is like, okay,
Mhm,
we can pay you now, and it's
yeah.
like, oh
Yep.
whoa, I didn't know I could actually make money off of this.
Mm,
So I believe now for me it's a game of staying true to that play, staying true to how authentic I can be
hmm,
through all of that, and also loving the fact that wow, I can actually make money from this is really
right.
cool. This can
Mhm.
support me, especially in my chiropractic program right now, paying the debts and stuff, paying all those the money I'm accruing. So
Yeah.
it's been more of a play, but it's been, hey, let me also take a big step back. A
Right.
lot of my, especially now, like I don't post as often as I
Mhm.
would and used to
Mhm.
do when I was in
Mhm.
undergrad.
Mm.
And that's mainly because I don't want to force anything, right? I want to keep
Right.
it a play and allow anything that comes in the moment, because I think the point where I push past that play and make it more of a competition, not even a competition, but make it more, I
Right.
guess, serious. Like that's not play anymore. Then that's where I start to hurt myself, and
Yeah.
that's when I start to
Yeah.
push past the point where I'm like, this is not fun. This is not
Mhm.
enjoyable. And I, I'd rather miss weeks of not posting
Yeah.
to post something that's not creative, that I would think in my
Mhm.
mind that would inspire someone else. So
Mhm.
that's kind of where I'm at with that and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's interesting. And, just kind of getting into it there, I'm also very curious, like, how's it felt when you watched, like, I don't know, was there like one moment? Because for me, it kind of looked like one moment. It's like, you know, you're in this group chat and there's so many of us and we all kind of have similar missions and we're on our creative journeys,
Mm.
sharing stuff and sharing ideas and feedback with each other. And then we all kind of just went our own ways a little bit, still staying up to date with each other, here and there. But for me, it felt like it just overnight kind of looked at your page and then looked at your page again. It's like, oh, wow, Jake has 100,000 followers. How did this happen? And so was there like just that one moment for you? Did it happen just like that? I think you also took advantage, if we're getting into the technicalities of social media, you were like there, right moment, right time with Instagram Reels and that sort of thing. And maybe you found this niche with calisthenics that maybe wasn't filled too much. I think if you remember, Unkit once, I think, shared
Yes.
in a call with us that he said he had a wow moment when his friend in person showed him this video that he was learning some calisthenics thing from, and it was your video, and he had no idea that Unkit knew you. And it was like, wow, Jake really did make it, man. Like, there's other people looking at his stuff. So,
Yeah, I would definitely say the most pivotal point was COVID, because
mhm.
that's where I took advantage of working out at home.
Yeah.
Hey, you can work out and train calisthenics at home, because I was already in community college. I was already inspired with the idea of calisthenics, and then I started to get into that. Then when I was in undergrad, I was living off campus, and COVID hit, so I
Mm,
wasn't really going to school much. So I was posting videos directed towards working out at home, really simple
mhm.
workouts, and I reached out on platforms like YouTube Shorts. Right? Actually, I don't know if YouTube Shorts. It might have just been starting. I think it was just
Right,
a thing
sure.
at the time, and
Yeah.
then Instagram Reels and TikTok. Those
Mm,
were like the big three.
yeah.
And the main thing that pushed me towards, I would say, an audience was
Mhm.
actually the help from other accounts. It
Right.
was the big accounts that had like over 1 million followers, that are the main calisthenic accounts. They're called
Uh-huh.
like, the name is Start Calisthenics. So there was a moment when they just randomly reposted one of my videos,
Okay,
and a
wow.
bunch of people from my high school were like, what the heck? This is like, what is going on? So
Yeah.
I saw that and I was really appreciative of that. And that
Mm,
brought a lot of people to my page, and
okay.
just started to cultivate this community,
Right,
and
right.
which was really awesome. Yeah. But really, yeah, that's where that was that pivotal point, was COVID. And I
Yeah,
took
okay.
advantage of that. And it happened in the
Yep.
span of 3 months, is where I went
Mm,
from like probably 20 to like 80 in the span
wow.
of three
Yeah.
months, which is,
Yeah.
yeah, possible for anyone
Yeah, no,
who wants
certainly.
to cultivate an actual, authentic, and that's what I
Yeah.
want to stick to, like
Right,
a
exactly.
community where, you're different from, I guess, what am I trying to say?
Mm,
You're you're different from another page that's just,
right.
wants to bring in the following to have a following, but it's to have, I like to call it a community. I think that's why, to have a community of people who I get to talk to and DM. Now I can't DM every single one of them, but it's really sweet to talk to the people that have been following me since my name was like a different name on
Mm,
my page, and just
mhm.
seeing where they're at in their journey, and just having conversations, and hoping one day that I can meet up with all of these people,
Right,
like,
right.
us in person. So that'd be awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're totally right with that, man, and that seems to me to be the right approach. I mean, all of this stuff is still so new. In many ways, when we're having these conversations, I sometimes feel like, I don't know, just like we're on the edge of something. We all kind of act like we know what we're doing when we do podcasts and we do these things, but you got to take a step back and like the technologies that we're using, the things that we're doing, this is all still so new that, like, yeah, even the term like an influencer or the fact that you can have a career on social media, all of that stuff seems like normal to us today. It's like, yeah, we understand it. My parents understand this dynamic today, but it's all like still so new that when we're trying to figure these things out and having these conversations and stuff, it's like, what are we doing? And what is the goal? What is the purpose? And it does seem to me like maybe the healthiest way, the best way to approach it is when you do care about cultivating those person to person connections and thinking about meeting people in person, doing something in person, or having a deeper connection to people through these platforms. That's where I think podcasting is great, just like a real conversation and not so quick and short term. But yeah, I like your mindset around it, and thanks for sharing those insights.
Yeah, thank you. I believe, also on that topic of podcasts is that this cultivates healthy communication towards cultivating something that we can set our mind, like you said, bigger to,
Mm-hmm.
where we can
Mm-hmm.
actually build a bigger, I'll say the word again, community,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
there's something about that. There's something about sparking new ideas with one
Mm-hmm.
another and
Mm-hmm.
then meeting up and making that an action, making that
Yeah.
thing real in real life. And that can be magical. That can be such a
Right.
special thing.
And
Like
and not
especially
replaceable. You can't replace that
right,
with any sort of technology, right?
right, yeah,
Mhm.
especially something about like I can see myself doing, and having this community where we all come out together and just train
Mhm.
calisthenics for fun, right? Work out for
Right.
fun, just for a good time. That's
Yeah,
what it's
yeah.
about.
Yeah, cool. Do you wanna get into Gibbons?
Yeah, let's do it. And yeah, so we were talking. You texted me the word Gibbons, and I saw that. I looked it up, and I was like, okay, what is Gibbons? And then I saw an ape, and now I know that Gibbons is an ape. And I'm really curious to kind of hear also about your journey with working at a zoo. What inspired you to first get into working at a zoo?
Yeah, okay,
And
sure.
yeah, kick it off
Yeah,
there.
yeah, and I think I did jump around the question of introducing myself too, but it was really it's been nice to listen to you explain on your end. I think I personally, just a side note on that, I sometimes struggle with that question because
Hmm.
I feel like I don't have like a direct thing to point to. Like, yeah, I did this thing over the last 5 years during the pandemic and during these times. I did this thing, and you can see like this thing that I achieved and accomplished. I can't really point to something, but I think that's more like a negative side of the social media world that we live in. It feels like over time you should be able to like, I got this many subscribers over this
Hmm.
many years. So we're so analytical focused, but unless like I'm tracking the books that I read, which I really do a bad job of doing, it feels like the stuff that I've been working on is so intangible that I can't always point to like, I did this, therefore I'm a influencer or I'm a author, which that is something that I'm more trying to align myself towards becoming, is an author and someone that I can introduce myself and say, yes, I'm an author and I've published this book and I'm working on this book. That's still a big process, is writing for me. And I like to think, well, there's actually a bit of a paradox here that I've discovered, which is it's not that the more you write, the closer you get to publishing a book. It's actually the opposite. It almost seems to me that the more I write, the further away I feel like I am from ever publishing something. You know what I mean? Because it just expands and gets bigger and bigger and more in depth, that it's like, okay, I'm going to need another year to really hone in on this idea. I'm going to need to edit this down. I'm going to need to do some more research, which I think is actually a great process because it keeps you busy, keeps your mind engaged with something. So that's kind of the background big project that I'm working on, is writing, I would say, a book, but in reality there's a good three separate ideas that I'm working on, and maybe we can talk about that later. It's, kind of complex, but it is somewhat related, some of those ideas, to the zoo at least. And so I can share a bit on that, which is I've been working at the zoo for 3 years now, and in the, you could call like the visitor education department. So like doing presentations, interacting with people, sometimes one on one, sometimes really having like as deep of conversations as like we're having here now, which has been really great. And it's almost talk about an antidote to social media interactions of online stuff. Here I am for my job, just every single day in person, communicating with people. And again, sometimes on the mic to large audiences, other times in person, just or one on one rather. And so that's like, talk about getting an education, right? And I haven't
Mm-hmm.
gone to university, I haven't done post secondary education. So for me, being in this zoo environment, this has been like such a education in ecology, zoology, and so much into human nature because of the interactions with people every single day. And I fluked my way into the job. I lucked my way into the job. And it happened during the pandemic as well. Another silver lining benefit that I received during that time when everything was kind of crazy. The zoo really just needed people on hand to help with health mandates. Otherwise, the zoo couldn't be open, right? There were certain things they needed to meet, certain areas that people needed to wear masks in, a certain amount of people allowed in a building at a time, and they needed staff to do that. Meanwhile, the staff that was there from previous before COVID days, a lot of them either left or they kind of didn't want to do these things. So I was like, yeah, I'll do it. Like, that sounds fun. And so I got my foot in the door that way. And then as the pandemic receded into the background and as restrictions lifted, then it became all the animal education stuff, all the fun stuff, right? And so that's been a really, really fun process to go through. And I've learned so much. Anything that we discuss about Gibbons or human evolution here has been learned on the job, but also I'm
Mm-hmm.
taking it home with me, and my bookshelves are filled with books relating to these things too. But I'll share one quick thing here too. And I don't know how you feel about, falling into things in terms of like a destiny or sort of predetermined path that we may have in life. And, life is pretty strange. So who knows how we end up doing the things that we do. But I think I have my earliest memory of life being at the zoo that I work at now. And I remember being in a stroller, which, you're pretty young when you're in a stroller. And I don't really have any other memories of me being in a stroller at that age. But I remember being in this habitat, which is no longer there anymore, but it had the elephants in it. And it was like inside, and it was this kind of big room. And one of the elephants made a loud trumpeting call, which kind of echoed in the building. And it probably terrified me as a little kid, which is probably why it stuck into my brain, right? Really scary memory drilled it into my memory. But yeah, I think about that memory a lot and other memories from a bit later in life of spending time at the zoo. And then it's kind of surreal to me to now be at the zoo like almost every single day in these same areas. And now I'm on the other side of it, teaching other
Mm-hmm.
people and helping little kids that come there today make these lasting memories into the future.
Wow. Wow, that was beautifully said. I feel like that was a calling, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
both figuratively and literally. It was a
Mm,
calling,
mm.
you know. An elephant called out, and it's yeah. You're
There's a lot
now
of symbolism there, isn't it?
right. There is.
Yeah, yeah.
Huh. Well, that's incredible. An incredible journey to
Mm,
get thus far. And I want to go back real quick because you said you had a tough time explaining. Like I have this thing that I achieved or something. I think
yeah,
also like
yeah.
who are you as a being? You as a
Mm,
being, you're very to me from an outside perspective. Now it's always subjective to each person, but very precise, very
mm,
what you do. You do it all the way. I feel that's what I see from a perspective, and you dive in. You don't leave any
mm.
crumbs on the table. Is how I would describe you. Because
Right, well, I
you have a
appreciate
lot to
that.
share. Yeah,
And
yeah.
for me personally, I feel that way too, but that's where it does get hard because you would think that mold of a person would then say, if you go all the way and do something to completion, you know, and I think this only actually comes this sort of negative voice in my head around that says, well, maybe I don't do things all the way because where is all my financial success, for example, from the things that I've done all the way? Right. And the answer is, well, I don't have it. And I still to this day struggle the same amount financially, at least, as I did 5 years ago. And so part of my mindset is like, well, wait a minute. If I was that into the things that I have been doing, then my bank account should,
Hmm.
show for that. And now I know how to talk that down in my mind right away and say, it's so much more to life than just that one metric. But just we're so shaped into that through society that it's hard to get that idea out of your mind and to think more long term about all the other things that you're achieving in life and going all the way with. But there are some doubts that I have with the pursuits that I've done. but I'm very easily able to philosophize those away and to still feel good about myself. But it is hard to shake certain metrics that we rate success with in society. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Quick question.
Yeah.
What are what are three things that have made you rich in who you are from being at
Damn.
the zoo?
I
Being at
love
the
that
zoo.
question actually, because that now I get into like, well, that's so easy, man. It's crazy. But I already touched on one is the ability to spend time talking to people every day that I'm there. That I go home some days and just think, how rich am I? Like the
Mm.
conversations that I had with people, I don't care how actual financially rich I was. I could never pay to do that. I could never pay to put myself in some of those positions and some of the tender moments that you'll have with kids, as you can imagine at the zoo. Little kids are just like so engaged and so interested. And some moments, man, are so touching that I almost just have to stop and think, like, wow, how precious was this moment to share? And not just with little kids, but with adults too. You'll get some really tender moments. So that's one huge aspect to the wealth that I receive of being in this environment. And then the other is, I guess I've shared them all already because the other is the education aspect. You know, instead of having to pay to go to university and study ecology, I'm there getting paid to study ecology. And the people that I work with that do have degrees, a lot of them say, like, I've learned more things, like tactical things here at the zoo than I did getting my degree. So getting the education aspect is a huge one as well. And then the other one, and then maybe you can share some thoughts on this too, is being in the presence of other beings, of other animals, and in the presence of nature all the time. And some of the nature is what you would maybe say artificial, because it's like, you know, manicured gardens and contained ecosystems and environments, but it's still nature. And I don't know, I would never spend time with banana trees and cacao and coffee trees. They just don't grow here in Canada. So being able to be in the conservatory and amongst those plants is really cool. And then just being in the vicinity of all the animals is so not only educational, but there seems something a bit deeper, something like on a spiritual level, you could say, that just seems to empower me as a human, being in the presence of all these other animals and just biodiversity in general. So those are three major points. And that's I always have this conversation with myself too. It's like, you know what? That outdoes any dollar value any day of the week.
Right. Yeah, you're a rich man right there. Yeah. To answer that though, you said I could
Mm,
speak on kind of being in the presence of nature and other beings, and I'll say other beings. And for me, there's nothing like the richness of just someone like this happened today. I was
mm,
working out and someone came up to me because they saw me doing handstands at the gym,
mm,
and I was doing Elsa to handstand practice. And he came up to me and he said, "How can I get into that?" You know, I always wanted to get into calisthenics, and we went into this whole long conversation. And then I
mm,
just started to be like, I always do this with people I meet. Most
mm.
like 99% of the time, unless I'm in a deep workout, then I'm like, all right, hold on, let me get back to. But I never do. You know, I'm not that
Yeah,
serious
yeah, yeah.
into my workout. You know,
Mm,
I take the time. I'm like, you know what, this is a rare moment. He
mm,
wanted to learn how to do this movement called skin the cat, which is actually a great
mm.
entry into Gibbons too, because
Okay.
the exercise, and I know monkeys do this a lot. This is kind of wild how this is all coming together
Mm,
because
mm.
as today, as of today, he wanted to learn
Mhm,
skin the cat, which is an exercise where you put your hands on the pull-up bar and you basically, the goal is to come
mm.
behind. So tuck in your knees, come bring your body behind yourself, come into yourself like a loop, and then you're kind of inverted in a way, and your shoulders are really rotated. They're extremely
Uh-huh.
rotated, and it's great for learning the back lever, learning front levers,
Mm,
calisthenic skills like this. And I kind of just broke it down segment by segment. Hey, hang, can you first hang from the bar, right? I
mm,
always like to break it down like that slow. Can you hang from the bar first? And then can you even lift your knees up to your chest? Can we get there? And then getting to that point is, that's awesome. Let's just work on that. You know, don't
mm,
even force the movement. But the reason why that this was such a richness for me is because I rarely get these in-person moments anymore. And
mm.
I know that I can create more of those. And it's kind of like an omen in a way that
Yeah,
this just
yeah.
comes in my path and I just get fired up and I just start rambling. Like I could go for a
Right.
whole hour with this dude just talking about things. And then I
Yeah.
find myself rambling too much to the point where I have to sit back and listen,
Uh-huh,
you know, and
uh-huh.
listen to this person. But just replaying this moment today of like that going on, that moment, everything else blacks out around me. And
Mhm.
I just love to see the joy in this other person getting to work, on themselves and getting to get close to achieving this skill because it's
Mm.
fun. It's an
Right.
enjoyable moment and you can always continue to progress and not
Mm.
even want to say the word become better, but you can always just continue to enjoy it and just
Yeah,
again and
yeah.
again. So there's richness in that. And
Mhm.
those moments to me are the most special because I get the most crazy and excited about them. So
Yeah, and a
yeah,
word that
and
comes to my mind too, thinking about that, is sustainable as well, right? That's like a sustainable joy, a sustainable form of richness that we can experience in our lives. Meaning, you can do this all the time. There's always going to be someone to have that interaction with. There's always someone who isn't going to know this skill, and you can engage with them and share feedback with each other. And I think that's the same when I'm out at the zoo and talking to people. This is an activity that there's always going to be people that want to learn something. And then there's always going to be people that want to share something. And as you know, when you're teaching, you're learning yourself too. So it's kind of just this never ending circle of just learning, 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 learning. And these are things kind of in contrast to, like, say, looking for social media growth or looking for financial growth or looking for business growth. Those are things that will reach a certain plateau at a certain point, right? They can only go so far. And if you think about society and our, say, consumerism, right, going through and buying things and shopping and that sort of stuff, these are kind of examples of unsustainable activities. Whereas this just interactions between humans and learning different skills and trying to better yourself, these are sustainable endeavors that we can do and continuously feel fulfilled and not feel exhausted and drained afterwards, like scrolling through Instagram for an hour
right.
will tend to do to a person, right?
Yeah, and I think we both just kind of defined this whole segment. We
Hmm.
just defined the non basically we went around what materialism is to us
Yeah.
and we went out of that script and we actually just defined what both is best in expressing ourselves as
Mm.
beings,
Hmm.
right? We just both expressed what makes us rich as
Right.
humans, and we went away from that whole materialistic viewpoint and then boom, we're now rich. We are, it says
Yes.
that even in the Bible, but
Right. Right. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, I
yeah,
mean, it's
you know
I think it's a powerful lesson. And this does tie into nature and environmentalism, which is always on my mind at the zoo. But then it somehow ties into, like we said, social media and the pursuits that we all have for ourselves today in this world. And I think, at large, really, there's a lot of us as members of humanity that really need to have these reminders, really try to figure out and talk amongst ourselves. What does it really mean to be wealthy? And what does it really mean to be successful? And how can we achieve these things together, and in not a way that it's like I get mine taken away from you, and it's
Hmm.
this rat race. Yeah. How did Skin the Cat, how does that name come to be?
that's
I'm
that's a
thinking
great
that as you say this.
that's a great question, and I don't have an answer for it.
Okay.
I never really wondered why. I just kind of accepted it. I used to
Yeah.
program that exercise because it's better done with calisthenic rings,
Mm.
and it's a lot more sustainable with calisthenic rings because the rings are designed in a circular fashion, right? As a bar is just a straight parallel line. So the rings, when you do the actual skin the cat, your shoulders get to rotate, so they're not as much pressure. Your glenohumeral joint's the number one joint that's susceptible to injury out of all the
Okay.
joints in the human body. So doing this movement on a parallel bar is a lot more difficult, I would say, in my opinion, than rings. I think it's a lot more easier because the rings can turn and you allow to more range of motion to go through that movement. But the
Hmm.
name, I have no clue. I guess a cat might have once been skinned. That's
Well, I
terrible, but
know there's
like
this saying, like, there's more than one way to skin a cat, which is like, it's just a saying, right? For, like, there's more than one way to do something. So I don't know if,
I
yeah,
never put that into thought. Well, I think this is a great entry point to jump into to Gibbons,
to skinning
and to die.
cats.
Just kidding. Cats. So my first cat, then. But yeah, let's
Yeah,
dive
okay,
into this
let's
because
do it, man. Let me
I would love to learn
brain
more
dump
about that.
a bunch of stuff onto you and see, like, what it makes you think of in terms of, like, human anatomy, which is something that I imagine you're really well versed in all of your studies, and as well as into calisthenics and stuff like that too. But I spend so much time watching the gibbons at the zoo, which I didn't know what a gibbon was either until being at the zoo. And I also would have looked at them and said, "Oh, look, there's a monkey swinging through the trees." And these distinctions are kind of sometimes, it's just taxonomy, but there is a DNA component, right, about placing different species in their family trees. But of course, everyone comes into the zoo and just points and says, "Oh, look, there's the monkey." And I don't correct half of them, but some people like our age or something, or older folks, I will explain to them that they are apes. And I don't know. I tend to focus on, like, if people think of an animal as being more closely related to us, like the gibbon is, I tend to think it's going to create more empathy towards that species, and people may research them a bit more. People may learn about ways that they can help them in the wild if they're endangered, which, every member of the ape family is to varying degrees. And so we can go through that quickly. There's bonobos and chimpanzees. Those are our two closest relatives. Do you know about bonobos?
I don't.
Okay, you do, even if you say you don't, because you've
Really?
probably seen pictures. They look just like a chimp, right? And they in
Okay, I'm looking up a picture and actually.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
you'll
Yeah.
see they're a bit darker skinned and they are a bit
Yeah.
shorter.
Gotcha.
But for a long time, they were just considered chimpanzees, even. But they're technically our first closest living ancestor, and then chimpanzees just after them, but both very close to us. And then it's the gorilla, which those are the African apes. And then you have the orangutan and the gibbon, which are the two apes throughout Asia, Southeast Asia mainly. So I always tell people that gibbons they're like our fifth closest cousin in the animal kingdom if you go down that list. But if you can pull up on your computer too, look up a gibbon skeleton.
Okay.
As I'm talking about this,
Gibbons
sometimes you'll get
skeleton.
pictures of the human, gorilla, chimpanzee, orangutan, and gibbon,
Wow.
and you'll notice out of all the ape species, they look the most like us. So maybe what
I
stands
mean,
out to you when you see that there?
oh, right away, their radial and ulnar bone. I mean that it's huge. The
What
radius
is
and
that?
ulna.
What
It
is
is so that's in your forearm here. First, there's three bones. I mean, I can name a bunch of bones right now.
that?
The main bones that I'm right away that draw on me are their arms. Their humerus bone is ginormous. I
Hmm.
mean, is this how they look in person? Their arms are this long.
Well,
this
I mean, their arms are incredibly long. They're also like, keep in mind, they're quite small creatures, like 15 to 20 pounds usually. So they're,
so
quite small.
can I ask a quick question here?
Yeah.
How if there are, you say these are these in relation to us being ancestors to the Gibbons, or was it the
No, no. So that's actually a
okay?
good question. And, this is kind of a flaw in our thinking often is like you'll look at a gorilla and people will say like, "Oh, that's what we evolved from." And it's like, "Well, no,
Hmm.
no, because what we evolved from doesn't exist anymore because that is what we are." Right? You're an iteration on something.
Right.
So if something is alive today like the gibbon is, we didn't evolve from them because they wouldn't exist. They would have been like a proto-human, right? And so
Okay.
it's more like we branched off. We had an ancestor that was the same species, and then eventually it branched off. But it's complicated because it branched off in so many ways, right? There's so many long dead ancestors that we all have, gibbons and humans too, that just don't exist anymore. Many iterations between us and what was once, us and gibbons, if that makes sense.
Right.
So
I
they're
see.
a cousin of us today, right? Just like, I don't know, I don't know an analogy. I mean, you wouldn't say that. Well, I don't know. Yeah, that's not a good analogy, but that's my explanation.
And just going back to these bones for everyone
Yeah, sure.
listening, I mean, again, number one, the main thing is in their femur. Their femur bones are crazy long. I mean, by the picture that I'm seeing,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's vast. And then you have this humerus. You have, like I'll point it out to you, in your forearm, you have
Hmm.
your radius and your ulna, which are bones right here. Your ulna is along the pinky, and your radius is along the thumb side. So you can kind of feel these in your body right here. Now theirs are about. It looks in the picture 20 times our size.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's
But
it's
it's also
wild.
comparative, right? They're again
Right.
smaller than us,
I
but if
see.
they were our size, it would be.
It would be. Okay. And
Yeah.
their fingers and their toes are very
Hmm.
long. And I guess this goes into kind of what we mentioned with calisthenics, their ability just to hang, right? Now, if
Yep.
we had fingers that were a lot longer, our grip would be a
Hmm.
lot more efficient, right? Because we
Mm.
could wrap around that bar. I mean, my fingers are a lot shorter now. A lot of people have longer fingers, so I mean, I can't even sometimes
Uh-huh.
wrap around a full thicker bar.
Okay.
But I mean, this gives us ability to swing to other things and just. I mean, I would just think strengthen those muscles in the fingers. You have a lot more. You're a lot
Yeah.
bigger advantage there, right?
Mm. Yeah, well,
I
and
know.
it's
How do they
interesting
look in
too.
the zoo?
Yeah, I mean, incredible. And they will just hang there like for forever. Like they can just hang for an hour and it looks as at ease as we are when we just stand, right?
Hmm.
Whereas actually if a gorilla looked at us just standing on our two legs all day, they would think, "Oh my god, how are these guys able to just stand on their two legs?" Because for a gorilla, standing up on their two legs is really kind of awkward, right? They're walking on all fours.
Right.
And yeah, so I guess just differences between different species, but then gibbons as well, they're unique in that they are able to be bipedal. So that's what we are, right? Bipedal, walking on two legs. Again, it's very awkward for a gorilla or chimpanzee to do that for long amounts of time. Gibbons is quite awkward too, but they do it much more than a gorilla or chimpanzee would. And
Hmm.
it's funny because they use those long arms and they just stick them out to the side and kind of bob side to side, and they look absolutely ridiculous when they run. But I find that fascinating too, that they have this bipedal ability when they are on land,
Hmm.
but they're mostly spending the majority of their lives in the trees. It's a bit different at the zoo. They come to the ground a bit more, but in the wild, they're living in these like just massive trees, sleeping up there, and they're swinging on branches as their main mode of transportation. And it's just like crazy to imagine. Imagine just living in the trees and just swinging around. And there's some statistic, I forget exactly, but there's a really high percentage of gibbons throughout their lifetime that will fall and break bones. Like it'd be
Hmm.
very rare to find a gibbon that's like 30 years old, which is getting to the longer end of their lifespan in the wild, that hasn't fallen out of a tree and broken some bone at some
Wow.
point in their life. So it's but I guess maybe it's like humans. Once we get quite old, it's likely that we'll, fall over and trip or something and injure ourselves. So
Hmm.
maybe it's just similar to them, but less wiggle room when you're living up in the trees.
Yeah, I'm trying to like think about how relating this, and I shouldn't be thinking about that. How I relate it to like comparison to human, but I mean, also I'm just really curious
Hmm.
to hear about. I mean, I assume they have enough room in the zoo to swing around, right? If
Oh
they're
yeah, yeah.
right.
I think we have a really nice habitat for them, and so I see like a whole spectrum of their dynamics on display. But it's really quite incredible. And yeah, I don't know. Is there like a specific observation you're interested in, or?
Mostly just because we talked about swinging, and I know that that's their mode of travel, right?
Mm,
Is going from tree to tree. And I'm looking at these pictures online while I'm talking to you, and it's
yeah.
like phenomenal because they're just hanging from these these trees, and it's like they can do that probably for hours, just keep
Oh
on
yeah.
going. I imagine.
It's
So,
it's really
did
incredible.
they?
And just keep that
Hmm.
that motion going. And there's something too with their shoulders. And I don't know if you can. I've had it explained to me many times, but anatomy and naming, what bones do what and this sort of thing. That's still a dynamic of animal and human, well, let's say anatomy, that doesn't always stick with my brain. So I hear these explanations, but I'm not so good at remembering or repeating it.
Hmm.
But I don't know, is there anything that stands out if you look at their like shoulder joints? Because there is something that they're just so flexible. And maybe
Yeah,
it's kind of something like when you're mentioning skinning the cat and just the rotation that we'll get, but it's so different for them just based on the way they are swinging and moving through the trees.
I will say one thing, and this is probably the reason why, and I can get into there's ranges of motion. So the ranges
Uh-huh.
of motion in our body that we have, and the two that come to my mind are abduction and adduction. Now,
Mm,
abduction, we think and we learn about it like abducting away from the body. An alien is abducting me. So my arms
Okay.
abduct, abduct away. Now, adduction, ADD, is when I'm adding to the body. So my arms are coming towards my body. And the only reason I'm bringing these two ranges of motion up is
Mhm.
because I'm looking at a picture right now, and their scapula, which is the big wing on our back, is pointed upwards. Now, in a relaxed motion, this is what it's doing. Their scapula, and I believe this is for all of them, all these pictures I'm seeing,
Yep.
all of these, the gibbons are just, their arms are relaxed, and for the most part, it looks like their scapula is pointed upwards,
Okay.
or kind of at a yeah, like this picture right here. It's kind of at a different angle
Mhm.
than ours is, which is kind of wild.
Yeah.
Which has me to believe that their abduction, their ability
Mm.
to reach up, is a lot more efficient than ours. Now we can reach up, all the way to the top, right?
Mm.
180. We
Mhm.
can come all the way up here,
Yep. Yep.
but it seems like they're very used to doing that with their
Yeah, yeah,
body,
and just
which probably
kinda
gives them
almost
that ability to
permanent
keep
in
there
many
and
ways.
hang there,
Yeah.
right? And if their scapula is kind of shifted, this just has me thinking: has it shifted
Mhm.
slightly, even like a little bit up into the sky? That's going to
Yeah.
give them more of a longer ability. They're going to be more proficient just by hanging there for a longer
Mhm.
amount of time, because their
Mhm.
muscles are now incongruent, in line with that direction of being able to hang. And you just think over time, if they're always in this motion too, if they're always having their arms abducted overhead, over
Yeah.
time they're going to become used to that, and then their lineage, I would assume, kind of
Mhm. Mhm.
is adapted to this form
Yeah.
of having their. And for everyone who's listening, I keep on putting my arms overhead, so keep, the they're so used to, their muscles are now so used to just training in this stature of overhead. Their arms are
Mhm.
overhead. Yeah, that just really catches my attention, and I see a lot of, like, you can even look at their cervical neck, and I really want to. I'm trying to find a close picture. I think I might have one. I'm trying to find a close picture of their cervicals.
Funny
And
enough,
trying.
I've yeah, really searched for a lot of these things too, and there's kind of a really quickly exhaustible, like, amount of images for them online of their
Right.
skeletons. It kind of blows my mind. Like, I kind of know really, like, the main 10 that you always see, and there seems to be, like, not many more images of certain things. So if anyone
Yeah.
out there has, like, a gibbon skeleton at home, take some more pictures, man. Upload those to Google. There's really lacking.
I would like to get into too their face structure, and what more do you know about,
Yes.
like,
Okay.
how their face is designed, especially obviously it's very designed very differently in relation to ours, and how does that make a difference? what what,
Right,
what
but if you
benefits do they
did
have?
see that picture with the other apes, right?
Yeah.
Their skull looks a lot more like humans than does the gorilla and chimpanzee.
Right.
And well, I actually don't know, and I'm sure someone out there has an answer. We should have a third person on this call who is a gibbon expert. Which, by the way, these are right. These are definitely topics and ideas that I'm looking to investigate more and more and more in my writing projects and in my podcasting as well. But just from what I understand, of course, skulls are based on diet, right? And what it is that you're eating. And
Mm,
so much of human evolution boils down to our tool usage, right? And
mhm.
so I forget the guy's name. I think it's Richard Wrangham
Okay.
wrote a book about fire and just how innovative of a technology that was for humans to be able to control fire. And what that meant is we could start cooking our food. So when you start cooking your food, you get more nutrient dense food in smaller quantities. So if you watch gorillas at a zoo or maybe in the wild, would be amazing to watch them. They're just spending so much of their time eating, 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 eating all the time. And it is interesting to learn that they're almost strictly herbivores. And I usually just say they are herbivores because, like, the animal protein that they eat is literally only termites. That is the only type of food that they eat besides plants. And that's like only a very small portion of their diet and more like just a kind of a niche snack that some populations have. And at the zoo, they don't get any termites. That's only sort of a wild thing. So they're the largest primate in the world that lives today, and they're complete herbivores. But you watch them, and they're also spending so much of their time eating, eating
Hmm.
all the time. And so that also factors into big jaw muscles, having to
Right.
chew your food. so much more. And humans too, even if we are today or were throughout our evolution more herbivorous, or what you would say today, vegan or vegetarian, we're still cooking a lot of those plants, right? And so it makes it more bioavailable for us to get these nutrients out of these things and to not have to eat such large quantities. So that's a major factor. And I don't know with gibbons. Again, someone probably has an answer, but just maybe because of their smaller size, they're not needing to eat the same quantity that gorillas or chimpanzees do. And so
Hmm.
maybe just because they're eating a bit less food and maybe more frugivorous, which is eating
Hmm.
lots more fruits, which require, as you can imagine, like less chewing, right? It's less to eat some berries and a mango than it is to chew on a bunch of lettuce and kale and other, more dense vegetation. So that might be the factor to their skull
And on
development.
top of and on top of that, to add to that,
Mm,
it's wild how like an ape can continue, I'm with their lineage to have that structured skull, whereas we see now, what do
mm-hmm,
we have a lot of food that's digested into things called smoothies,
uh-huh,
into soft chewable foods,
mm-hmm,
that we just put down.
mm,
Now I'm going into that whole path of the book Breath by James Nestor, where he talks
right.
about eating foods that are not nutrient dense, not
Mm,
hard, and
mm-hmm,
make
mm-hmm,
us actually work our jaw muscles. What are we doing over time? Now we just see that our face structure is there's a
yeah,
word for it. I think it's uh, I mean one of the kind of outcomes of that is apnea, sleep apnea, and he
mm,
mentions this in his book. But it's wild to see how when we don't eat a lot of meats,
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm,
actually eat something that is just actually challenging our palate and our jaw to really chew and acquire taste, is that our skull, our structure of our bone actually changes. It
yeah,
changes its dimension. And yeah, it's just fascinating. I wanted to kind of go down that route a little bit about
yeah,
breath,
yeah,
because a lot of us as well breathe through our mouths. And you might even look at apes too and chimpanzees. And I guarantee you, I'm not sure, but I want to ask you this question. Do they
yeah,
breathe through
yeah.
their nose?
Well,
Do
I
they
was
actually open their mouth most of the time?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that as you were before you even asked the question, and yeah, I think I have spent time observing that directly, and it is nose breathing.
Hmm.
There's some interesting things you really notice when a gorilla opens their mouth, because first of all, if they're showing their teeth, that's a sign, that's a threatening sign, right? And so we always try to teach this to people when they come into the zoo, because you can get quite close to them through the window. And at this point, the gorillas at the zoo know that when we're smiling, we're just that's what humans do. But to gorillas, if they're doing that to each other, and I'll tell a quick story. There was one gorilla that was hand raised at a different zoo. So spending times with zookeepers and just being raised by them, by humans. And then when it got reintroduced to the troop, it had these like subtle things to us, but to gorillas, they really noticed different, like for smiling, for example, if a gorilla then is like learning to show its teeth, that's a sign of threatening. And so all these tiny little things were just subtly off with it because it was picking up certain human behaviors that for gorillas is just slightly different. It turned out this gorilla tried different zoos and it finally was integrated to the troop at the Calgary Zoo. So I think it's a really cool story. But but yeah, nose breathing certainly so, because again, you would notice if their mouth was open and if they're showing their teeth. It's similar to humans too. If you watch different animals really exert themselves, they will pant and have more mouth breathing. But just the day to day,
Interesting.
the casual breath seems to almost always be through the nose. But as you say this, I'm going to take some time to really observe that with every species that I can at the zoo.
Hmm. Yeah,
Hmm.
I just found it fascinating because I feel like a lot of animals, going off of that,
Hmm.
breathe through their nose. Just
Yeah,
that's,
yeah,
and
yeah.
we're an animal too, so it's like we
Hmm.
should be our day to day breathing through our nose, which
Hmm.
is just another reason why our the features to our face becomes deformed. Because another thing it talks about, James Nestor talks about in the book Breath, is that the airways are actually a lot bigger in our nose than they are in our mouth.
Hmm.
So focusing on breathing through our nose
Hmm.
actually has a lot more benefits than it does mouth breathing. And you're
Yeah.
also limiting the amount of pathogens or whatever's in the
Hmm.
air
Hmm.
going. And to your nose rather than if we're mouth breathing.
Yeah, it
So
seems to
there's a
be
lot there.
assigned
Yeah.
to, as I've learned these things as well. And there's a great guy that I met a few years ago. I'm going to do a podcast with him soon, and that's his whole thing is nose breathing, nose breathing. So he has all this, that'd be like the equivalent of us having a Gibbons expert on the podcast right now. He'll be able to
That'd
explain
be
all the
cool.
things to it. But as I've learned these things myself, I've again observed it in other humans. And yeah, I often say at the zoo as well, I'm there watching the animals too as much as I can, but in many ways I go into observation mode with the humans. And so I'm learning so much by watching all the thousands of people that come through. And it is an observation I've definitely made that people that are walking around breathing through their mouths, you can also notice a lot of other signs that they're maybe not in the best health too. Like
Mhm.
these things usually go hand in hand. You don't see some really fit, healthy, robust looking person walking around with their mouth open, but
Right.
you will often see that with maybe an overweight and a lot of times older people with
Hmm.
white hair and just in that age range, and they're walking around just with their mouth completely open. And I think, oh man, like that's
Hmm.
you know, yeah.
Yeah. Would we even dare to say that the animals in the zoo are adapting at a better rate than us?
Yeah, well, it is fascinating, right? I mean, there is an aspect of health within animal populations, and it's kind of cheating in zoos because they do have access to veterinarian
Hmm.
care, right? And they will try to fix and address certain issues. But when you're in the wild, if you have any sort of a thing that makes you a bit less adaptable than the other individuals, then you're just not going to survive long, right? And so it
Hmm.
really is you're getting the animals that are currently living in that moment. They're ones that are in good health and are in good shape. And I think with us humans, and I think this is obviously fantastic, it's amazing that we can prolong our lifespans even if we have major health issues. But then since we can prolong our lifespans, even having major health issues, that means that we can often have health issues that we don't address because we can put band aids on it and keep
Right.
getting along,
Right.
right? So I think it's both a blessing and a curse for us that we have that because you can, not notice, right? If you go to a doctor and you have an issue that may be, say, related to something like mouth breathing, they can just put a band aid on that issue without you addressing the mouth breathing concern,
Right. And
right?
then it goes
So,
away, and then it comes right
mhm,
back as the same. It's a repeating issue. And I actually talked
yeah.
about this in a podcast I was just shooting recently
Mm,
with one of my colleagues, all about um, how these pills, these different types of things that were
mhm,
prescribed, these medications only mask and
yes.
cover the actual real issue. And a lot of these, I don't even want to call it issue, but
Mhm.
these new adaptations, I'll call them,
Yeah,
that
sure.
are coming up, in the body can be reversed or
Uh-huh.
introduced with another new adaptation that is a more holistic or natural
Mm,
path to take and can be done without including any medications
right,
or
right.
just doing something in our daily life, which I wanted to kind of ask you,
Yeah,
being
okay.
around all these different kind of animals at the zoo, has this changed anything nutritionally in your daily life or even
Ooh,
physically in your daily life?
that's actually a really good question because to me, this is a question of correlation doesn't equal causation, perhaps, because it definitely is the case that for the last 3 years of my life, this has been the healthiest I've ever felt. And my diet has changed and just my whole lifestyle has changed. But I think these things have just happened in tandem, right? I don't know if and they've probably piggybacked off of each other. I can't point to one thing though, like watching gorillas eat, their lettuce and broccoli and kale, and that hasn't made me eat a raw vegan diet, right? But it has made me ponder, like, why or what are we specifically adapted to eat? And I have made some interesting observations. I don't know how you feel about kale, but I don't know. I've watched. So there's gorillas and then colobus monkeys, which is a different primate, and they'll sometimes share the same habitat with gorillas. Which, as a side note, it's really that's kind of a new direction that zoos today and the best zoos are moving towards is having more animals living amongst each other, kind of
Hmm.
like they would in the wild, of course,
Hmm.
right? And it's same with humans too. And maybe this is actually answering your question in a different sort of way, but the more time you spend with other life forms, whether it's plants or animals, just seems to be the healthier you feel. And so that has been a lesson that I've learned is like, yeah, this mono lifestyle of just living in a contained house and never going outside or never having different scents in your environment. And I don't even know the ways in which different pheromones and different chemicals affect us. Or, when you're walking out in nature, the things that you're breathing in, we can't think of it, but all the fungal spores in the air or the different microorganisms that come into us from our food if we're eating maybe more organic foods and not just
Right.
cleansed prepackaged stuff, that is having a direct impact on us. And that's something that I've had to learn, though. I still don't know if I feel it. You know what I mean? Like, I think
Mm.
I have to think my way into understanding microorganisms in my gut. I don't think there's any way I could come to that understanding just through feeling alone. You know what I mean? Because it's so abstract to imagine microscopic organisms and how they affect us.
See, that's a deep perspective.
Yeah.
Right now, because I see you post on your stories, especially when I watch that, I see a lot of it's just very clean. Like what you eat is
Uh,
just very clean. Like, are you always sticking to this kind
yeah.
of
Well,
regimen?
certainly,
And
my focus for eating is just meat and vegetables. And that's like,
mm,
I don't know
basic,
if,
keep
yeah,
it
and I
simple.
think that checks out evolutionarily, meat and
Right.
vegetables. And of course, cooked meat. I don't know. I think some people get into crazy. I don't know. I think it's a little crazy thinking about like eating maybe like raw liver or something like that. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Again, going back to, I think a big part of human evolution is that we learned how to cook food. So I don't know why we're having to go back to eating raw meat like our ancestors would have or that different animals do. I think cooking food is really important.
Right.
Even for vegetables too, I think I'm mostly cooking vegetables. I don't really yeah, but anyways, yeah, just meat and vegetables. That's like how I go, and I think
Yeah.
that's like a good, really basic approach to food.
Right. And I think the actually to the animals, I think the animals teach us that simplistic manner
Yes,
of
yes.
eating, very simple, right? And I think we get it confused, right? Because I talked about this again recently and how we have such convenience with fast food. It's a staple, it's convenient, right? We can drive through, they have it prepared, ready for us. But there's something different about creating food in your own home,
Mm-hmm.
how special that can be for oneself and with
Yeah.
other people. So, and I feel like these animals teach us that simplistic way of eating.
Yeah,
We still,
100%.
yeah.
And I don't know, I think they also teach me to really like enjoy your food. Although sometimes they look like Gibbons, for example. They're also like quite crazy. Like they're really skittish too. You watch them
Mm,
and they're just so, and I don't know what makes them so energetic, what it is, but they seem to just have so much energy. And you see that when they're swinging through the trees, they're not slow and lumbering. It's like boom, boom, boom.
right.
They're so incredibly fast. And so when you watch them eating, they're sometimes just eating so quickly, but it does seem to me that they're really like intent with what
Mm,
they do, right? And I don't know, humans might eat food quickly too, but oftentimes it's you're doing that and watching something on your phone, so you're not even aware
yeah.
of what it's one
Right.
thing to eat fast, but it's another thing to eat unconsciously and to not even
Mm.
know that you're eating because you're also watching TV or something, right?
And I imagine the gibbons also share. Do they share with others? Like,
Well, the two Gibbons that live here, they're both brothers, so you can imagine they're sometimes squabbling over food with each other and taking food from each other. But I don't know. That might also be a different aspect in the zoo because there's always plenty for all of them, right? You would never
mm,
get in a situation where they would need to compete for food. Whereas in the wild, that might be a different story. If you really like the fruit in this tree, you don't care about your neighbor. You're going to make sure that they don't get any. So I think, yeah, I think animals are actually quite rather selfish. Humans are probably really unique in that we will actually share our food. You even watch that with gorillas raising their babies, which
mm,
has been really incredible. I've gotten to watch two baby gorillas now, and they're just still almost 2 years old, and then the other one just almost a year old, and
mm,
that's been really, really profound thing to watch. But parenting is a bit different, right? So gorillas
mm.
are always obviously very strong. The mothers will sometimes like poke their babies and they'll fully like go back
Wow.
and topple over, but that's just like how they are. They're just really strong creatures. But you'll watch human moms watching that and they cringe like, "Oh my god, why are you doing that?"
Right. They think it's bad, or do they think
Yeah,
it's wrong?
yeah,
And
yeah. Yeah, but
Mm,
it's I think there's lessons in that too. They're just roughing around, tumbling
right.
around, rolling over. The gorilla moms don't just grab their baby right away. Oh my God, are you okay? And caring for themselves. Obviously, human babies are very fragile compared to gorilla babies, but still, I think there's an aspect of being a bit more rough and tough when you're growing up. But to the food bit, the gorilla moms, they will nurse their babies and feed them breast milk for up to 2 years. But when they start to eat solid food, the moms don't gather up food and then give it to their babies. It's kind of like, you've watched me eat enough food. It's up to you. Like when you're ready,
Wow.
just start eating food on your own. They literally like, they just eat their way through their environment. So in the wild, at the zoo as well, but certainly in the wild, they're just eating everything around them. The trees and all the plants, that's all food for them. Say if their preferences and they go to different areas where they can know to get good food from. But I think that's the mindset. If you could say they had a mindset around this, is just that once the young are ready, they just go and get their food on their own. But you don't see that the mom's like bringing the food to them. So that's kind of an interesting observation.
That's really fascinating. Another thing that I found out and I
Mm,
didn't mention earlier was that they in the bones in their body they have six cervical vertebrae, which we have seven, and they
okay.
have it says, and I don't know how true this is, it says segments have 13 and the third has 14 thoracic vertebrae. Now we have 12. So
Okay.
another thing just going off
Hmm.
of that, their thoracic, their body, their whole
Hmm.
thoracic cage is a longer. Now I know you said the
Oh,
gibbons are
okay.
smaller, but their
Yeah.
thoracic region is longer, which also could mean for the longer stature span with their arms.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff.
Yeah, I think there's a thought I wanted to close out with the Gibbons there, and you were mentioning or comparing our shoulders and our stretching with our arms ability to the Gibbons, and yeah, like as you said, we have a lot of those abilities too, not to the extent of the Gibbons, and that's something I guess that answers your earlier question just now as well about things that I've learned for my own health from being around and observing these animals. And that's one is like, hey, maybe I should hang more, right?
Hmm.
Maybe I'm walking around all day with my arms at my side and I'm watching the Gibbons, our close cousin, and they're just always swinging through the trees. It's like, oh, wait a minute, I can kind of swing too. So it's inspired me to do the monkey bars a lot more. And I'll say that when I'm giving talks out and people laugh, but I hope it inspires them to do too. Because I don't know, is that something, Jake, that's like a use it or lose it kind of thing? Like we never hang from things these days. You do when you're a kid, you do the monkey bars, but as adults, we don't do any of this unless we're like yourself and do these things consciously. So,
Man, I think that's where we see the joy in those gibbons is because they
mhm,
play, right? And
right.
we lost that play aspect. As we grow
Yeah.
older, we age, we get on stress or external things come on to external factors, and then we lose that whole mindset of having fun, play. And I
Hmm.
remember when I went to a zoo and I saw apes and chimpanzees, like they're laughing, and I mean, they're
Yeah.
all obviously there's all different kind of emotions, but even still,
Right.
I feel like the older ones they all have fun, they all enjoy, and I believe it's so vital, especially
Mm,
for those that sit long periods of time.
mm,
Me in chiropractic school, at
mm.
40 hours a week, so I'm sitting. I can sit up to upwards of 8 hours a day.
Well, that's
With
ironic, isn't it? Based on what
isn't it
you're
crazy? Yeah,
studying.
right. At chiropractic school, but I'm sitting for. But it's
Yeah.
also a choice, right? It's a
Mm,
choice for
right,
me to
right.
sit.
Yeah.
I could stand. I could stand in the back. I can always stand up and watch and learn that way. It's just not as practical in some
Yeah.
rooms.
Yeah.
But then again, I can also do the opposing thing, which is hang from a bar every day. And I have
Mm,
a
mhm,
pull up bar and dip bar in my backyard, which I benefit from almost every day. I'll go out there randomly in the day and just hang for
mhm.
a minute, just to hang there, or just go out for 30 seconds and just hang from the bar because it's
Yeah.
decompressing my spine. It's
Right.
alleviating that pressure from sitting down all day.
Mm,
Yeah, I really feel like we lost the play and also
mhm,
don't incorporate as much as that hanging where they have, they
mhm.
hang
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you gotta learn how to hang, and, I wish that those, like, pull-up bars or things to hang from were more prevalent because I think that's actually just the problem is you don't have these areas to do it, and for me, there's a park not too far from where I live, but it's also especially now, it's been, like, really cold lately, so it's often impractical to go out to that, so what I've found is in my building where I live, there's, like, this weird stairwell, and there's this kind of, like, like a barrier for the
Mm.
upstairs, but I can reach under and hang from that. So that's been part of my routine every single day. When I take the stairs to get down to go outside, I always go and hang from this. And yeah, luckily no one else in my building takes the stairs, and I've never been like caught doing it. But if I was, I invite them to come do it with me. But there is an elevator in my building, and to me, it just doesn't exist.
Mm.
I've just, and this is kind of such an old and stupid cliche. It's like, oh, you want to lose weight, make it your resolution to do the stairs more. And I think that's fine advice, but it is actually something that you should, just make part of your mindset. Just
Of
walk more.
course.
Like, don't try to
Right.
take all these shortcuts in life.
It can really be simple, and that's another thing. I
Mm,
feel like we confuse it. We confuse a lot of things,
mm,
but it's eating is simple, right? But
yes.
if
Yeah.
physical exercise, it's simple, right? But we can make it difficult, right? Walking, it's as simple as
Hmm.
the old thing: park farther from where you're at and
Yes.
walk a little further. But we can start with these simple tasks from
Right.
hanging in a stairwell, right? Hanging, using that to our advantage,
Mhm.
using the world to our advantage,
Yeah.
using
Yeah.
the world to play.
Hmm. Damn, that's good. That's a quote.
I kind of wanted to, coming to an end here, I kind of wanted to ask you a question that I asked, kind of an open ended question, and more than welcome to ask it back. Is
Mm,
what is one thing that you are giving yourself grace with right now,
mm.
in your current time?
Yeah, I think I answered it. And actually,
Mm.
yeah, yeah, is giving myself grace with like just rating my success, right? Rating
Mm.
my personal success, like how well am I doing in life? And I know 100% I'm proud of myself, and I just really trust the trajectory that I'm on, and I trust that the things that I do day to day are valuable, are beneficial, and that if that doesn't show up in ways that I might be socialized into thinking that it should show up, that's not the only measure of success. And that's what I have been giving myself grace with. But also, I think maybe a more specific one is the writing process.
Mm.
So, writing and hopefully getting closer to completing and finishing a book. That's something that I'm just letting myself flow and not be stressed about it, and just enjoying the process.
Mm.
And how would you
Beautiful.
answer that?
Yeah. I would answer it the last sentence you just answered it:
Yeah,
enjoying the process there,
yeah.
learning to enjoy the day to day. Really giving myself grace with that, because I put a lot of pressure on. I need to, comes up for me like sometimes I need to, I need to do this. I need to do this all in the
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
I need to meditate. I need to do the nice bath. I need to
Mm,
do the, and I just recently came to a realization that too much of something, obviously, well,
mm,
I knew this, too much of something is not great, right?
yeah.
And there's that duality. So it's
Mhm,
like, yes, there's that discipline aspect of doing a nice bath every day, but there's
mhm.
also that other aspect of like, is my body really feeling this at the moment?
Right.
Is this doing more harm than it is good?
Mhm,
And I think that's really what I'm giving myself grace with, to talk about, to go deeper into it, is learning to listen,
mm,
learning to listen to what we call in chiropractic school the
mm,
innate. So that innate calling, for me, it's God. For me, it's Jesus. It's within,
mm,
which I don't believe is separate from us.
right.
And it's learning to listen to that and trust that,
Mm,
and yeah, be patient with that process, and not being hard on myself if I don't do that, if I don't do a nice bath, if
right.
I skip a day of meditation.
Yeah.
It's picking it back up and just letting it be as it is,
Mm.
and so that's where I'm at. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really crucial, and I totally, fully agree, and that is, yeah, to me, I relate that to exercise, to ice baths, to eating, and that sort of thing. That's something I've really learned myself, is that's maybe the most important thing, because, yeah, you might skip doing something that you wanted to do, or
Mm.
you might eat something that you didn't really wanna eat. Now the worst thing you can do is beat yourself up for doing that or not doing that, right?
That's right.
You made that choice and whatever. So now just don't stress about it and just keep
Right.
going and do the next thing or don't do the next thing. just making those day-to-day decisions. Can you talk quickly on the ice bath things? I watch your videos there,
Yes.
and you got a whole setup, which is cool.
Yeah.
My whole dream is a sauna right beside an ice bath,
That's
and
my
to
dream
just
as
have
well.
access to that.
The Wim Hof dream.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful for the bath because
Mm,
it truly has brought me that discipline aspect.
mm,
And aside from the part that I don't do it every single day, I'm doing it
mhm,
now where I feel called to do. And
mm,
it could be in the middle of the day, which I did a couple
right.
days ago, right after before one of my classes. I was like 30 minutes, and I jumped right in, and it was peaceful. It was more peaceful
Mm,
and energizing. I got out of there and I was in class wired. I was just boom, like I'm here, I'm ready.
crazy.
And it was a lab, so I got to be interactive, which
Mm,
is fun that we have that as well in chiropractic
mm,
school. A lot of labs,
mhm,
and so it's been a great learning process as well to calm my body down after the
mm,
ice bath. When I get in there, it's cold, but the more challenging, I'm not gonna say the word hard, the more challenging aspect
mm,
is when I get out and I take a hot shower. To me, the
right.
hot shower is a reward now. I
Yeah.
am so grateful for warm
Mm,
water. And after I get out of there, though, that's actually the more challenging part, is because I go
mm,
to this temperature of cold, freezing
mhm,
cold, into a hot shower, out of the hot shower, and now it's like, okay, the environment inside's like 68, 69 degrees, but it's the change is so rapid that my body cannot stop shaking, cannot stop shivering.
right.
So it's I found that to be so much more challenging. So I have to
Mm,
what I have to, which has been a process too. When I do it, it's like really be deep breathing and relaxing my body, or just doing a heck ton of push-ups, and that works.
mhm.
That does the job too. But yeah, I'm so fascinated with ice baths. I've always have been. I mean, that's
Mm,
how we kind of
yeah,
found each
that's
other. That's how we found each other. I was doing cold showers and the Wim Hof breathing, and I haven't really dabbled with Wim Hof too much in a
mhm,
while. And I do it here and there in the blue moon, which
yeah,
has
yeah,
always been so really. Every time I do it, when I haven't in a while, I lie
yeah,
there for so long laughing. This
right.
pure dopamine that's
Yeah,
exuding
man.
from my body. I just laugh and laugh, and yeah, the cool thing about the ice bath is that when I go to, because I'll do it right before class, usually in the
Mhm,
morning. And these past couple of days I haven't, but when I was in those early mornings at like 5 a.m., I mean, I get out there and it's like, I don't want to do this, dude. I really don't. But there
yeah,
was something about pushing past that of
mhm,
like, all right, it'll be about 5 minutes or however long I'm in there, no time.
mm,
I'm
yep,
just in there, and it's a great way too to share the gospel
mm,
with others, which
mm,
has been a great learning journey for myself, more
right.
importantly. But yeah, it has brought me a lot of opportunity and a lot of connection with myself.
Yeah, man, no, that's amazing, and yeah, that ties into the, too much of a good thing is no longer a good thing anymore, even for
Right.
stuff like that too. And yeah, I think if I go back 4 or 5 years ago, I would have thought that a measurement of my success going forward I would have trained myself to be able to do a cold shower or do an ice bath every single day. And I'd be so disciplined and so great at it. And now I realize, like, oh no, it doesn't matter. What matters is that I've done it before and I know
Right.
how to do it. I know how it makes me feel. Imagine all the people still in the world today, even as popular as these things are, breath work, exercise, cold water, but a lot of people haven't discovered it. A lot of people haven't found the value in doing that. So even just knowing that and then knowing you can fall back on it. If you have a
Mm.
really bad day or life is really difficult for you, guys like you and me, we know where to go. We know how
Mm.
to find comfort and to realign ourselves and to fix our problems kind of internally before having to feel like it's the end of the world, right?
Yes. Well put. Well put.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jack, again for having a conversation with the both of us. I
mm,
like that instead. That's what a podcast is. I feel it's
100%.
just a conversation between the two of us,
Hmm.
and both of us having a viewpoint. And we had some really good topics we talked about, and I know we'll have another talk again. We'll call it
Yeah,
that.
for sure, man.
Have another conversation again. And I appreciate you as a friend
Mm,
and just what you're doing and your daily endeavors. You're so consistent, you're so precise, and you're, like I said, you leave no crumbs on the table.
mm,
And that's how I see it. And it is very inspiring on my
mm,
end, um, to do the diligent work that you are doing, and all that you do,
mm.
and I've learned a lot today. So thank you.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate those words, Jake, and I would say everything honestly right back at you. for sure. And hopefully next time I will have some more insight into gibbon anatomy. But you shared some valuable things with me, so I'm curious to continue on this topic. But yeah, man, it's been great. And yeah, likewise, it's been really fun to talk with you here. And I know we'll do this again soon.
Yeah, and that'll be something else. I guess that you can continue to share with
Mm,
others at the zoo is their anatomy, and that's just going
right.
to make you stronger.
Yep. Yep. 100%.
Right on. Thank you, brother.
Awesome, man. Okay. Now, before we do this, I'm going to hit stop and then it
Okay.
might reset us, but then we'll give it time to download.